What if the greatest enemy of humanity was never a surprise to God? What if Satan's rebellion, every lie, every temptation, every moment of suffering was known before creation even began? Then the question becomes unavoidable. Why would God create Satan, knowing exactly what would happen? This is one of the most difficult and unsettling questions in all of Christianity. If God is all-knowing, if God is all-powerful, and if God is perfectly good, then why create a being who would become the source of so much evil? Is this a flaw in the story, or is there something deeper we're missing? In this video, we're not going to rush to easy answers. Instead, we'll explore this question carefully, biblically, theologically, and philosophically. The Bible never gives a single direct answer to this question, but it gives us pieces. Satan is not introduced as evil from the beginning. Instead, passages like Ezekiel 28 and Isaiah 14, though debated, have traditionally been interpreted as describing a powerful, beautiful being who fell because of pride. In this view, Satan wasn't created evil. He became evil. That distinction matters. God creates angels and humans with the ability to choose, and somewhere in that freedom, Satan chose rebellion. In the New Testament, Jesus refers to Satan as the father of lies and speaks of his fall from heaven. But again, there's no suggestion that God made him evil. So, the biblical picture seems to be this. God created a good being who used his freedom to become something else. But that leads to a deeper question. If God knew that would happen, why create him at all? One of the most common explanations centers on free will. If God desires real love, authentic, chosen, meaningful love, then creatures must have the ability to reject him. Love that cannot be refused isn't really love, so God creates beings with freedom, not programmed obedience, but genuine choice. But here's the tension. Freedom opens the door not just to love, but to rebellion, not just to goodness, but to evil. In this view, Satan is not a design flaw. He is a consequence of a world where freedom is real. But that raises an uncomfortable thought. Could God have created free beings who would always freely choose good? Some argue no, that even God cannot force a free choice without destroying freedom itself. Others argue yes, and that God simply chose not to. And that's where the question becomes less about logic and more about trust. Another perspective suggests that Satan's existence plays a role in a much larger story, a story where good is not just created, but revealed. Think about it. Would we understand mercy without wrongdoing? Would we grasp grace without failure? Would we truly see love without the possibility of rejection? Some theologians argue that the presence of evil allows God's character to be displayed more fully: justice, mercy, patience, redemption. Without the fall of humanity and of Satan, those aspects might remain hidden. But this idea is controversial because it raises a difficult concern. Does that mean evil is somehow necessary? And if it is, does that make God responsible for it? Christian theology typically answers carefully. God permits evil, but does not cause it. Still, that distinction can feel thin when faced with real suffering. Now we come to one of the hardest parts of this question. God knew. If God is truly all-knowing, then before creating Satan, he already saw the rebellion, the deception, the destruction, the pain throughout human history. So why go forward anyway? Some theologians suggest that knowing something will happen is not the same as causing it. For example, a parent might know their child will make painful mistakes, but still chooses to bring them into the world. But critics push back. That analogy only goes so far, because human parents don't have perfect knowledge or absolute power. God does. So, the question remains, if you knew with certainty that creating someone would lead to immense suffering, would you still do it? And if God did, what does that say about his nature? Let's be honest. This question doesn't have a clean, satisfying answer. For many people, it creates real tension. It can make God seem distant, or even unjust. It can raise doubts about whether the story makes sense. It can challenge the idea of a perfectly good creator. And those doubts matter, because faith that ignores hard questions often doesn't last. But faith that wrestles, that questions, that refuses easy answers, can grow deeper. Maybe the question isn't just, why did God create Satan? Maybe the deeper question is, what kind of world is God trying to create? A world with no freedom, no risk, no possibility of evil? Or a world where love is real, even if it comes at a cost? If the story of the Bible is true, it doesn't end with Satan's rebellion. It moves toward restoration, toward justice, toward the ultimate defeat of evil. In that sense, Satan is not the final chapter. He's part of a larger story that isn't finished yet. But now I want to hear from you. Do you think free will is enough to explain this? Or does this question raise deeper problems about God's nature? Comment your thoughts below. Seriously, I read them. And if you enjoy exploring questions like this, honestly, thoughtfully, without easy answers, subscribe to Sacred Questions. Because some questions aren't meant to be avoided, they're meant to be faced.